Hey, I'm Jenny. In this video, I'll be answering the spiritual question, what are the Akashic Records? I first heard the Akashic Records, of the term or the idea of the Akashic Records, in 2020 before the pandemic. And in the same week, 3 different people asked me about the Akashic Records, just assuming I knew about them. And so this led me to think, okay, I don't know. I've heard of Akasha and I didn't quite understand it. And so I thought, okay, let me do some research. And so I bought Linda Howe's book. She's kind of the original Westerner to bring the idea of Akashic Records into a succinct format for people to access. And since then, it's my education and it has evolved. So the Akashic Records are something that have been talked about throughout time in all kinds of religions. So Akasha is actually an Indian word, Hindu, and there is a whole idea of the same thing in Buddhism, and in the Bible it's called the Book of Life. So what it is it's a record of all of humanity, and a celestial or spiritual record, like a book of life. And so how most people describe it or visualize it in meditations or just, talk about it is as a giant library in the cosmos. Most people say Pleiades, where all of anything we ever do in this life, in our past lives, is recorded. So all of your past lives, all of this current life, it is all recorded into your own personal book or books. And you have your own section of this metaphysical, metaphorical library. And you can access this place through certain prayers or through meditation. And once you access it, you can gain information from what are called the Lords of the Records. Those are the beings that guide the records. Your own personal angels and guides, and anyone you call in to help you, like the Ascended Masters or the Council of Light. And if you're watching this, you're probably already on a spiritual path. And if you're not, you may be thinking, what? And I will be honest, at first I was kind of this is kind of crazy. And I've always believed that we reincarnate, because I just look around and I just see there's no way we just get this one chance to prove that, we're worthy of returning to God. It just doesn't seem fair. And so I've always thought that, but I never really cared to learn about my past lives. And people would talk like Shirley MacLaine and stuff and talk about being an Egyptian this and that. And I just was kind of okay, whatever, that's fine that you think that. I just feel it sounds kind of crazy. And I wasn't trying to be judgy, but I think I was being a little judgy. And so I was feeling like that. But then in 2019, I went to a gem and mineral show and I wanted to buy prayer beads, a Malala, right? And I was actually looking for my own beads. I wanted to get 108 beads and make my own prayer beads to meditate with. And so I'm at the gem and mineral show. It's just a normal day with my family and just looking at rocks because I love crystals, and come across this stand that had actual prayer beads, and then they had these sacred geometry that were gold, and I was drawn to a certain one, and I started talking to the woman there, and she was of an Indian background, and there was a man also of Indian background sitting on his phone just kind of like this, and whatever, he was just probably bored. And then he looks up at me and he comes over and he's may I take your hand? And I was okay, it's fine. And he starts talking to me, and at this point I had already sent my family to go and look on, because I was asking this lady a lot of questions and I could tell the kids were getting bored. And so he grabbed my hand and he's you are my sister. I can tell. He's I can see your life where you worked at the temple and thousands of people came to learn from you and you handed out lotus flowers to them. And he went on to talk about how I have really strong spirit guides and they watch over my family, which I've heard so many times from other psychics and readers as well. And if you ever have the joy of doing a card reading for me, you'll see that they're just very pushy, right? They're just very pushy guys. And so he starts telling me these things and talks about this past life. And I had always wondered, I had recently been thinking how I must have been like a monk or a nun in a past life, because I have like, you tell me like you have to give up gluten, I'll do it today. Like and I've always been like that. I'm very militant. I have no problem like giving things up. I like quiet, like solitude, and just like unusual, I guess, in that way. I was like, I wonder if I would just joke like I was probably a monk in a last life. And then he's talking about me being at this temple and giving out lotus flowers, and he was just so kind. I ended up buying prayer beads, but he gave me like a big discount because he just felt like we were related, not in this life. And so I had that experience, and then I learned about the Akashic Records, that you could access your past lives. I joined an Akashic Records Facebook group, started listening to Ashley Wood's podcast, Align Within. I read the Linda Howe book, and then I used Linda Howe's prayer to get into my Akashic Records, and nothing would happen. I would just sit, and I would see like lights in sacred geometry, which I learned later from Denise Lind, that's common in meditation. Like when your third eye is opening, you'll see like sacred geometry and lights, but like nothing really else. It's just like, it's a clue that you're opening up. And at the same time, I had taken a free course from Kyle Gray about angels and guardian angels, and I got his Keeper of the Light deck, and I was learning about Ascended Masters, and then I later joined Angel Team that year. So I had all this going on, and but the Akashic Records just wouldn't open for me. And so I was like, I think maybe I'll buy an Akashic Records reading, which you can buy on Etsy. And so if you do, I recommend my friend Laura, who has Intuitive Dreams on Etsy, and she does angelic Akashic Records. This is not like, she's not paying me for this, but she's really amazing. And so a friend of mine recommended her, so I was like, okay. So I paid for like 30 minutes, but she ended up doing over 45 minutes. And she told me like, your guides are just really pushy. So it was like second time, like someone told me that. And everything she told me like deeply resonated, and it was shocking. And I learned about a few past lives in that reading. Since then, I've had a few readings from Laura, and I've also recommended her to several people. Everything's been spot on. And I also was in an Akashic Records group, and I had someone also give me a reading a little bit after that, just practicing for free. And her reading was spot on. I learned in Laura's reading, and I don't mind sharing this was like very significant, that I had been an Egyptian high priestess. And I was like laughing when I heard this, because that was the thing. I was like, everyone talks about how they've been like a goddess or a priestess or a king or a queen, but like literally had been. And so anyway, so I heard that, and I learned that I was like, I could channel Isis, and I've always been drawn to Isis since I was like 13. She's been my favorite goddess. And Egyptian things, but always like Egyptian things. I thought everybody did, but apparently not. And so I was having like a really good life, and then there was some kind of coup, and they cast me out, and I died destitute. And since that life, I was afraid to step into my spiritual power again. And this resonated so deeply, because I had been on a spiritual path as a teenager, and I'd gotten really close, but I'd get really afraid, and I'd like draw back and like not really want to have this power. Like, and by power, I don't mean like mwahaha power. I mean like spiritual power to help others and be a healer, okay? And so I had this whole confirmation with this. And so she told me, like, you have to call your power back, which I did. And there's actually a poem in my poetry book based off of that whole incident of calling back my power. And so having this reading, I was like, okay, I understand how it can be done. And I had a situation with El Morier where he helped me channel, because he opens up your throat chakra. And he basically told me like to open your mouth. He's like, just open your mouth. And so I opened my mouth, and then all of these things came out. I wasn't doing that. I was sitting quietly in meditation. And so I learned the way I channel is like, obviously comes through and then it comes out my mouth. And so I just use my phone to record what I have to say. But the Linda Howe prayer just never really worked. So I switched to Align Within, Ashley Wood's Prayer of a New Earth. And ever since then, I've been able to access the records very easily. So I access them. I personally like to do it every week and just see what there is to say, because it's like, spirituality is like any kind of thing. It's a muscle. Like, you have to practice. You can't just like open the records every once in a while and expect it to work for you. So if you're interested in the Akashic Records, there are different avenues. So there's different prayers out there. There are different meditations. Rebecca Campbell has some, and there's a ton that you can find where they take you to like your own library and you can go into the records that way. It's really up to you how you want to access it, like how it makes you feel comfortable. But I would suggest that you perhaps get a reading first so you can understand like what it's about. But be very careful who you trust, because this is a sacred thing. This is your Akashic records. This is the records of your entire lifetimes, like all your lifetimes of your soul. Someone's connecting to you on a soul level. So make sure it's someone you trust. And I would suggest getting the reading and then seeing from there and then deciding how you'd like to access it on your own, because it's very empowering to learn that, you know, a certain past life has caused issues in this life for you. There's a book called Journey of the Souls, I think. It's by a psychiatrist who was using hypnosis to help his patients, but he realized he was actually using hypnosis to access their soul. And then their soul would speak and they would talk about all these past lives. And it goes, the Akashic Records and everything I've read have gone along with that book, and what Matteo Stefano talks about past lives, like it's all connected. And so I really believe in the Akashic Records. I have been in my own records. I don't currently read for other people. I just don't feel like I'm at that spot right now in my life. I like prefer oracle and card readings, and I prefer connecting that way. I just don't feel like it's my thing to do that, personally. But I do, if you feel like you've seen the word or you felt called, you felt drawn to this video, I definitely think that means you're ready to have some kind of learning or understanding. But I will caution you that it's very easy for certain people to just get stuck in their past life work. Like just think like, because it's fun. It's like, oh, I had this life and I had this life, and it's like, it's exciting. But it's easy to get stuck there and just want to remain in those lives, and it's kind of be like a fruitless journey, because you can just be like working on all this past stuff, but your own life isn't being taken care of. And so that's why I only access it once a week, and I don't ask about past lives. I just ask for messages, and that's how the messages that I share on here, that's where they come from, and just open up to being a channel in them. And so yeah, that's my one cautionary, is you don't want to get caught up on just past life work. There are Akashic Records, Oracle, and Tarot decks too that help. And then there are ways to access past lives through dreams. So there are lots of things. And if you are someone that believes in reincarnation, believes in past lives, feels like you're ready to learn about them, then I would suggest it is time for you to dive into the Akashic Records. I would suggest reading Linda Howe's book. I think it gives her book on the Akashic Records. I don't have it anymore. I gave it to a friend. But it gives you like a really basic understanding, and then you can go from there and decide if her prayer works for you, and if it doesn't, there are lots of other people's prayers out there. And then maybe getting a reading to see by someone you trust, getting a reading to see what it's all about, and then from there deciding, how it's best for you to personally access your records, and how it's best for you to learn the information. Like you might be a visual person, and so you might end up drawing after, or you might be like me and need to open your mouth. And then other people, it's automatic writing. So they just kind of sit, open their records, and then they just start writing or typing. So it's really kind of up to you how you connect. But yeah, it's very real. It's very interesting. And like I said, I definitely caution with you becoming like too into it. I like to get 2 Akashic Records from my friend Laura every year. So like one in the spring, one in the fall. And sometimes I ask questions, sometimes I don't. I just like to see, what comes through. Because yes, I am a channel, and yes, my angels and guides talk to me, but sometimes you need an outside perspective, and sometimes I need to be hit over the head with the messages. Like I need to hear it 100 times, and I'm like, oh yeah, like I need to do that. Like, and my angels are probably like, yeah, we've told you so many times. And so, for me, I think twice a year is good. They're just, like I said, I caution anybody relying on someone else too often, or going into the records like too often and feeling like, that's the only way they can do things or learn. It's about balance. And on the spiritual journey, it's very easy to become imbalanced and focus too much on one thing, because yes, it's important to learn about your past lives and learn, maybe some past life trauma that is holding you back in this life, because a lot of people will talk about, current aches and pains or ailments, or a lot of times are caused by past life. I personally have had asthma my whole life, and I just have a hard time taking deep breaths, and something I really work on. I feel like I just can't expand my lungs. And I did learn that I had a life as an orphan where one of my lungs was collapsed and just really unhealthy. And that's still affecting me in this life. And so that kind of helped me work with that. And something you can do in your records is clear your records of that life. I like to clear and heal my lungs, clear my records of this, and heal my lungs in this life. And so that's what it's really used for. It should be a tool to make this life better for you and heal in this life, so that you don't keep reliving the same trauma over and over again. And yeah, I think that's a pretty good overview. If you have any questions or comments, or want to know more, or have another question, of a spirituality question that you'd like me to answer, please let me know. I love a like and a subscribe, but I love a share even more. I hope this is interesting to you, and I'd love to hear your Akashic Records stories.